Thank you for tuning in to EUNOIA. It's your host and spiritual mentor, Sable Danielle. If you weren't here for the last episode, we discussed fear and ego. Today we'll be talking about another topic that I hold dear to my heart. Do you ever feel like you're holding on to something so tightly that you end up pushing it away further or hurting yourself in the process? That, my friends, is what I call resistance. So far, we've talked about self-reflection, accountability, fear, and ego. One of the toughest things to deal with while you're on this journey of life is resistance, which stems from fear but is still a beast of its own. Resistance shows up in many forms and does just what it says it's going to do. Resist your progress. Simply put, resistance is the inability to accept reality. In more spiritual terms, it's the unconscious influence upon something that you're not quite ready to embrace or accept. To me, this means you're not intentionally resisting. In fact, many people don't even realize that some of their actions may be supporting resistance. They may think the opposite. I know I did, which is why I believe self-awareness is so important. I cannot stress that enough, and I will mention it time and time again. But why resist? People tend to resist things when it questions their reality, their normal day-to-day routines, or when it challenges their way of thinking. When it comes to change or being introduced to something new, fear of the unknown and having a selective perception or being closed-minded are some of the reasons that people resist. But also, new ideas can make individuals feel like their power is being threatened, and somehow this new idea or new way of life may interfere with their wish fulfillment, causing resistance. As we grow older, humans tend to feel safe in the present because it's familiar and it's been a controlled environment. It's been the norm. We know the ins and outs, we know the possible obstacles, and we know how to conquer those obstacles with our eyes closed because we do this every day. We are pros. We begin to become so comfortable with where we're at that we push away and become closed off to anything new or unknown because comfortable is always the best option, right? Wrong. That's kind of what I meant when I mentioned being on autopilot in one of my previous episodes. We have this repetitive routine, and typically nobody wants to stray from that routine, regardless of how hurtful, draining, or monotonous we claim it is. We tend to control our environment in order to feel safe. We are in a society where a lot of us have been taught to fight for what you want until you get it. But is that really the right way to go about it? I thought that was the correct way up until my 29th year, which just so happened to be my golden year, the year I hit rock bottom and my year of many epiphanies. This was the year that I realized that I was fighting so hard to keep my life the same because I thought that's what I wanted and I needed, because it had been my norm for so long and because I was living on autopilot. But when I finally decided to take the time to figure out why the life I wanted and I was fighting so hard to keep was so hurtful and draining, I realized it was because I was fighting for something that wasn't meant to be. I was fighting for something that didn't want me. I was fighting for control. I was fighting for the sake of keeping things the same. I was fighting to win, not for happiness. I was fighting out of desperation. I was fighting for the years, time, and energy that I had already put into my life thus far. But just because something has been your norm for so long, that doesn't mean that it's what's best for you, or that there's not better out there for you. In fact, I realized I wasn't really even fighting. I was forcing. I was holding on to something that had been dead and gone for a long time. I was controlling. I was avoiding change. I was resisting, because what if the change is worse than my norm? If I stopped fighting, then what? Only question marks filled the air because that was an unknown that I previously didn't want to face. All I knew was go after what you want and don't stop. But I had to stop, because I was fighting so hard that my fists were bloody. I was fighting so hard that I was internally dying. I was fighting so hard that I was physically affected after time. So truly, what the fuck was I fighting for? Surely not my happiness, not for me, or my future. All that fighting I thought I was doing really was just me resisting change and an unknown future. All that fighting kept me in a toxic life cycle, and it kept me unhappy. I didn't realize that I could have let go of control and stopped resisting a long time ago, and I could have found my happiness. You can't force things. I believe that we are doing ourselves a disservice by teaching this mindset of constantly fighting to get what you want or fighting to keep what you already have. You can't see it, but I put air quotes around have because if something is ours, we shouldn't have to fight that hard to keep it. It should just flow. I'm not saying to quit easily, and I'm not saying to no longer put effort into things. I guess what I'm saying is to kind of put a cap on your effort. Do the work, put the effort in, try your best, but don't do that forever. If it's bringing you unhappiness or negative feelings, or if it feels one-sided, at some point you have to stop, because what you're actually doing is forcing. There's a huge difference between fighting for something and trying to force something. If you're constantly fighting to achieve something, to keep something, is it really meant to be? Is it yours to be had? Is it really going to make you happy and fulfill all of your wishes? Is that what this life is about? Fighting so hard for happiness that you ignore the fact that you're not actually happy? Rather than just removing yourself, letting go of control, or letting things flow whatever way that may be. Through my experiences, I have found that allowing things to just flow rather than resisting change is much easier. As I'm writing this, it's making me think about one of my favorite throwbacks that I used to listen to with my dad, Ghetto Boys, Mind Playing Tricks on Me. The last verse specifically mentions that he's fighting somebody, protecting himself. But as time went on, he realized that he was actually fighting himself this whole time. That's kind of what resistance is to me. You believe that you're fighting for the greater good of you and protecting your happiness and fulfillment, when in all actuality you're probably fighting against and holding yourself back from true fulfillment, growth, and happiness. I can't take all the credit regarding this epiphany. I made a post on IG a while back about control. SZA helped me realize the power of control when her debut album came out. There was a piece at the end of Supermodel where her grandmother, I believe, was talking and said, "That's my greatest fear, that if I lost control or didn't have control, things would just be fatal." The funny thing is that, from that sentence, I realized that trying to control everything was actually beginning to be fatal for me. Relinquishing control is what saved me. Control was my biggest form of resistance and very detrimental to my health and happiness. The opposite of resistance is acceptance. Once I began accepting my life, my situation, and who I was in that moment, I was then able to figure out my next moves. I was able to put my energy into figuring out how to change and achieve the happiness that I previously thought I was fighting to keep. In Deepak Chopra's 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, there is the law of least effort, or the law of least resistance. This law basically means to accept what is, accept your current reality, accept things for what they are. That includes how people feel about you. With this law, you should take things at face value. Take responsibility for your part or role in any situation and let go of the need to control or defend. If you can accept things for what they are, that allows you to free up so much energy and mental space. Rather than putting all that energy into forcing and resisting, you can then use that energy for bigger and better things. That energy should always be used on yourself and for your self-improvement, your goals, and your true happiness. And that's when the magic happens. That's when life begins to flow. Energy is a frequency. What you give your energy to is what you're going to get in return. So don't focus on what you don't want. Don't focus on what you're trying to resist. Don't focus on the unknowns or trying to keep things the same. Focus on what you do know. Focus on what's at face value. Focus on what you're good at. Focus on where you want to go and how you can achieve that, rather than just trying to make things happen. Focus on what can truly make you happy and how you can grow. Focus on changing your life and your reality for the better, not on how to avoid things that you don't want. When you think about it, we face resistance in many different ways on a daily basis. Whether it's driving in traffic and you're resisting the amount of time that it takes you to get there. You sit in your car and you're angry and you're cussing people out and you get road rage because you're not accepting the fact that I'm going to be there late. I'm probably going to arrive late and I can't do anything about this traffic. If you can change your mindset to accepting the fact that the traffic is going to be there, sure, it might be a little bit irritating. You're still going to be late for work, but it is what it is. You can't change anything about that. So why sit in your car and be angry and stressed just because you're resisting the traffic? I remember at one of my old jobs, I worked with mostly older people, but we had a meeting because overall the agency wanted to give us docking stations so that we could have laptops rather than having big, huge computers at our desk. And everybody left that meeting upset because they were resisting the change of getting laptops, which, how does that affect your day-to-day life? It doesn't. You still come to work and you still do your job. It is what it is. So why are you resisting it? People resist things in their relationships. People resist different opinions from others. We just need to try to get out of that state of mind. If you find yourself in a more resisting energy than a flowy energy, I hope you take the time to pick that apart, because you truly are only hindering your growth and happiness and your future. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you join me next week. Next week we'll be discussing perspectives and wabi-sabi, but you'll have to tune in to find out exactly what that is and what it means to me. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'ma holla at you. Sable Danielle.